Hey there, good people in crypto land. I'm Matt Leising, and this is my podcast, Decent People. Welcome back to the conversation. On today's show, I talked with Ben Mills. He is the co-founder of the Meso network, which is trying to help people move their money into crypto and then take it out again. It's called on-ramping and off-ramping. And for anyone who's gone through this process, you can know it can be a real headache. Ben has a deep history in payments. He was at Venmo and Braintree for many years and helped design the payments methods and processes we use when we're splitting a check at a restaurant with our friends or sending somebody some birthday money. So he's trying to bring those lessons that he learned in TradFi into crypto with Meso. We got deep into the payments sector. It felt like a payments palooza, and then talked more about Meso, and what they're really trying to do is focus on security and risk on the back end, so that you, when you want to get money into, say, your wallet, that you don't have to wait 3 to 10 days like you might have to on Coinbase. It was a really interesting conversation, and they are going to be launching to new users in August. So by the time you hear this, it should be available for folks to check out. And I hope you enjoyed this conversation. Thank you very much. Hey, Ben, how you doing?
Good. How are you today, Matt?
I'm great. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you coming on the podcast. I'm really excited to talk to you because you guys at Meso Networks are addressing one of the big sticking points and pain points, I think, in crypto, which is it's difficult to get your US dollars or your euros or your yen into the digital world where you can then buy Ether or Bitcoin or DeFi protocol tokens. It's called on-ramping, and then off-ramping is the opposite, where you change your crypto back into fiat. Good for you guys. And I was wondering if maybe you could just tell me a little bit, because I think everyone understands you have to connect a bank account to your crypto account. And maybe we could start there with, you tell me a little bit about where the idea came from, and was it a pain point in your personal life, or you and your co-founder, or how did it all come about?
Yeah. My co-founder and I have been active in crypto for the last couple of years. He got pretty deeply involved, I think, in the 2019, 2020 period. And I came in a little bit after that. And I think both of us at multiple points have felt the pain of whether it's trying to get into a hot NFT mint or buy at the right time across a decentralized exchange and needing to get money into our self-custodial wallet. And really the only way to do that was using Coinbase or some other centralized exchange, which just felt both just annoying and just a lot of friction, also just very risky and unsafe. At least back then, the common pattern was you buy Ether, USDC, Sol on Coinbase, then you copy and paste your address into Coinbase and hope you didn't make a typo, and then eventually you get it into your wallet. And on top of that, you're waiting usually between 3 to 10 days for the actual payment to clear on the centralized exchange, which adds even more delay. So it was definitely a personal pain point. And as we really built our conviction in crypto and both were interested in really going in full time, we realized there was just this great overlap between the experience both of us had spending 10 plus years working in fintech and payments and this pretty clear problem that needs to be solved for crypto. So that was the genesis of it. And then I think what really pushed us to accelerate and go all in on Meso was when we started to look very closely at what are the solutions that exist today or who else is really trying to solve this problem. And there's a lot of great teams working on and off ramps. But was especially true back in 2021, 2022, but that we were seeing a lot of teams not applying some of the best practices and lessons learned in fintech over the last 10 years to this problem. And we think there's a lot of improvements to be had, both in the end user experience, fees, and the integration that developers can build into their apps once we apply a lot of those lessons. Yeah, that's a little bit about Meso.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, it's interesting because I think it's one of the ways that crypto still doesn't live up to the hype. You hear about almost instantaneous transactions and, this and that about sending money around the world. But then you go, and like you said, okay, I've just connected my bank to Coinbase, but it's now 5 days later, I'm going to be able to get what I actually want to do. And that 5-day wait can be an eternity in crypto. And I was wondering, like the banks have really had a checkered past with wanting their customers to be involved in the crypto space. Has that changed at all? I know when I was still at Bloomberg News, most of the banks wouldn't touch crypto with a 10-foot pole. They've come around, but I'm curious if that was also something that was driving you and your co-founder to get involved here.
Yeah, I'd say we've definitely seen improvement, but we're far away from where we need to be, especially when you talk about the large consumer banks like Chase or Wells Fargo. We're seeing them take an incredibly risk-averse approach to crypto. For instance, most Chase account holders are blocked from using their debit card with any crypto product, which is just astounding to me, frankly, that like my bank gets to tell me how I get to use my money. I think a lot of this I attribute to really a communication problem. I think a lot of what the banks are scared of is things like how do we prevent money laundering? How do we keep users safe? Just because this technology is so new. And I think sadly it got, how did I say this? I think there's a bad perception, especially in the early days of crypto, that it was primarily used for illegal activities. And where we're sitting now, and I think teams like Chain Analysis have done a great job representing the industry in front of Congress about this, is blockchains are really, I think, the most auditable payment infrastructure that has been created. And a lot of what I see as the power of crypto when it comes to the banking and regulatory community is it's a better foundation to prevent things like money laundering, to stop bad behavior and ultimately keep users safe because of the transparency and neutrality of these blockchain networks. So a lot of what I was doing in one of my previous jobs at Venmo was working with regulators and compliance professionals about translating the things that we can do with technology to streamline the user experience without sacrificing the controls to keep users, the whole ecosystem safe. And we were really successful. I think there was a big push, especially near the end of my time at Venmo, to KYC every user. And the more we were able to explain how sophisticated we could be at risk management, all the different other kind of signals we could use in the background to detect bad or suspicious activity, we were able to get regulators and the compliance ecosystem very comfortable with our model without requiring traditional full KYC. And that lesson really, or the lesson I really took from that was, I think if you are able to translate new and potentially scary technology into language that regulators and compliance people understand, you can make a lot of headway and get to a solution that actually works for the consumer and works for the ecosystem overall. And so that's a lot of what we're trying to do at Meso. Is we spend a lot of time, and I personally spend a lot of my time with regulators, with compliance teams, helping them understand where is crypto very new and very different, but also where is that actually very similar? Like when I was first setting out and thinking through how we would build something like Meso, the more I looked at it, the more I felt this is very close, if not identical, to the kind of compliance footprint of something like Venmo. A lot of the same controls and things you need, you have to put in place to do on and off ramping. And a lot of the data and visibility that you would have doing something like Venmo, you also have with an on and off ramp product. Regulation is a very hot topic in crypto, and there's certainly very clear areas of regulation that we need more clarity on as industry. And a lot of that has to do with securities. But when it comes to things like AML, KYC, et cetera, I think crypto is compatible with all of those laws, and in some ways more compatible than TradFi. So I think we have a lot going for us when it comes to getting the banks to come around. But for right now, it is a big pain point. And it's actually one of the things that we've changed our perspective on since the beginning was initially, and we still expect to support card-based on and off ramping as well as bank-based on and off ramping. But we're now focusing on bank-based or ACH-based on and off ramping initially, because that is the only payment rail where we get to control the full risk decision. When you use a card-based payment, the issuing bank or the consumer's bank gets to make a decision. Do I approve this transaction or not? And they're running their own risk rules and have their own risk models, et cetera.
Yeah.
Traditionally, that's really just a net positive for everyone because it's just an added layer of safety. But when it comes to crypto, at least where we're sitting right now, we just believe a lot of the banks are taking the wrong approach. So using ACH allows us to fully own that risk decision, which gives us complete control of the user experience, which is critical for what we're trying to do.
Yeah. And just to spell out some of those acronyms, AML is anti-money laundering. Yeah, no problem. Anti-money laundering, and KYC is know your customer. So those are two very important banking regulations that retail banks have to adhere to. It strikes me though, when you're talking about Venmo or PayPal and the message that was received by regulators about how you guys had risk management in the background and it could handle that, those are all bank-to-bank transactions. And it strikes me that crypto is a competing payment rail, right? We're talking about crypto being a global payment system that's not under the control of any bank or government or corporation. So I wonder, did you ever get a sense, or have you ever gotten a sense that some of that resistance to the bank from the banks to allow their customers onto crypto exchanges and whatnot was just a self-preservation on their part, where that's a competitor, right? Basically, if you're allowing someone to go on Coinbase and buy a bunch of Bitcoin, they're not going to maybe be using the banking services as much as previously.
Yeah, I think it's a good point. And I haven't spent much time with the large consumer banks like Chase. Maybe they would have a slightly different perspective. But generally, when it comes to monetization of payments directly, banks are really not they're getting a pretty small cut of that. The real kind of market leaders there are the card networks, MasterCard, Visa, Amex. So in many ways, especially for smaller banks, I think they see crypto as an opportunity. I think a lot of what we've seen, especially the last 5-10 years in fintech, is this tension between banks wanting to pursue alternative payment rails and take out the middleman of Visa and MasterCard. We saw this with both what Plaid is doing in terms of making ACH easier, as well as the whole strategy around Zelle, which in many ways is an alternative payment rail, which I think many of the banks involved in Zelle have aspirations to expand that further. So I think there's appetite for banks to find ways to get more involved in the flow of funds with payments. And I think crypto is potentially one of those ways. Yeah. It's also interesting, like the people who I would have expected to reject or try to prevent crypto's ascendance as much as possible would be the card networks. But it's been one of the most surprising things to me is how much the card networks are leaning into crypto. I've spent time with Kai, who's the head of crypto at Visa, and really the whole crypto team at Visa. And I've been really impressed. I think they've been pushing on a lot of interesting ideas and not just the kind of surface level crypto ideas. I think we've probably all seen many examples of TradFi companies trying to adopt crypto, and they're really doing it more at the surface level. But what like Visa is doing now is they're experimenting with L2s. They're digging, which are, I assume the audience knows L2s, but
yeah, it's a layer 2.
Is that fair?
It's something, that is, it's a roll up. It's something that's not, every transaction is not going through the base layer. So you can do a lot of transactions quickly and then they get put back on chain once you're done doing it. But what is going on at Visa why do you think that Visa is, if your instinct would be they would want to reject it, but they're embracing it? Why do you think that is? What do they see about it that is leading them to be experimenting with all this stuff?
I don't know for sure. I haven't asked them that directly. What I would speculate is it's one of the reasons that I'm most excited about crypto, which is it's open, permissionless technology that's truly neutral. And so there's, like everyone, they are trying to figure out, hey, can we help accelerate this and position ourselves as part of a foundational part of the ecosystem? If they're successful at that, then I think they could potentially have a great future for years to come. One of the most impactful moments in fintech history over the last couple of years was, in my mind, Apple Pay, and that the card networks were pretty masterful in their ability to maintain their market position by powering something like Apple Pay, which then led to the underlying technology, which is called network tokenization, that has powered many other new exciting experiences and products across fintech. If that hadn't happened, and Apple probably could have pulled off cutting out the card networks, who knows where they would be today. But in many ways, that helped further cement them in their current position. I think if I were Visa, I don't really see a downside. I think the idea of being able to stop crypto at this stage feels like a foolish strategy. Spending time to figure out if can we position ourselves in this kind of new era, I think makes a ton of sense.
Yeah. I noticed you guys at Meso, I don't know if it's your tagline or whatnot, but you say it's fintech built for crypto. And as we can tell here, you've got a deep history in fintech coming from Venmo. Your co-founder was at PayPal. But what led you there? Did you always love technology as a kid, or what was the kind of path that set you to be here talking to me now about crypto rails and ACH payments?
I was absolutely obsessed with technology from a very young age. I think that I vividly remember, I forget how old I was, but setting up playing a real-time strategy game with my friend over the internet for the first time, being on the phone with him and being like, are you seeing what I'm seeing? Or am I moving things and you're seeing it on your screen? And it was just mind-blowing to me. And from a very early age, I just was fascinated with how it all worked. I was desperate to make my own website in elementary school, which I think I paid with GeoCities. And from there, just tinkered. I think in general, I'm someone who just really likes to tinker. I like to play with things. I like to figure out how to make things more efficient and improve things. And I also like helping other people or building tools for other people. That looked like when I was in high school, building fun little programs or programs to help with homework, like TI-83s, or in college and late high school, building little web apps to help either facilitate games my friends and I are playing or just for other reasons. So I think that was really my entry point. And then I think especially when I was getting into college, this would have been in the mid 2000s, the internet was in this perfect period for me where it was widespread enough that almost every business was hey, I need a website or I need to upgrade my website. But it was so new that no one really knew what they were doing. And so that created a situation for me where even in high school, I started contracting for local businesses, making websites. And then throughout college, I really just worked. I went to a college that was a kind of a liberal arts / art school in downtown Chicago called Columbia College. And one of the reasons I really liked it was in downtown Chicago, which gives me access to a lot of companies that I could contract at or work at. And the way their schedule was set up is I could set up my classes to go to school for 3 days a week, which gave me a bunch of time to do side projects and work. Because what was obvious to me even before I started college is all this stuff is moving so fast that I don't need to learn how to make websites in college. I need to learn other things that will help me make websites. And primarily, I just need to do work and just do the repetitions and try things and build. And so I think that gave me a great opportunity to do that.
Yeah, if I had scheduled my college classes for 3 days a week, I think I would have used my extra time to go surfing and party with my friends. So there's that.
I definitely did not use all of the time productively, I'm sure.
Yeah. Were your parents into technology, or was that something that or was this all on your own?
No, I think both of my parents are curious. I think they're very open to new technology, but I would definitely not describe either of them as very tech focused. So I don't really know where that came from. I think it was just the proximity to technology. They were very quick to get a personal computer. So for most of my childhood, we had some form of personal computer at home. And so I think that is really what opened the door for me.
So you said you went to college in downtown Chicago. Did you grow up in Illinois or in the Midwest?
Yeah, I grew up in the suburbs of Chicago, which is where most of my family and my wife's family is from.
Okay, cool. So once you're in college and making websites for folks and upgrading them, did you have a path of what you thought you wanted to do? Or was there a moment where fintech caught your eye?
So one other important detail about me is I'm a terrible student. I have a very hard time doing things that I'm not excited in. So I did very badly in high school. College, I ended up doing a lot better at because I had a lot more control of what I got to study. But because of my experience in high school and due to a misconception of what it meant to be a programmer, through most of high school and in my early part of college, I really thought that I wasn't smart enough to be a programmer. I was like, I'm not good at math, therefore I can't program. So I was much more focused on user experience, design, interface design. That was what really captivated me. And I think if I look back, really what I was passionate about was product, or like product, what I think some people might call product management today, which is like the intersection of all those things, like the intersection of design, business, engineering, all of that. But luckily, during my time in college, I got enough exposure to programming where I realized like I was just wrong. And actually, I really enjoy programming. And that led me down a path to being like, okay, I want to build, but like for me, the type of things I want to build. And back then I was looking at things like a lot of the early stuff that Google put out, like Gmail, Google Maps, was a pretty big follower of 37 Signals, which was one of the very few well-known tech companies based in Chicago. And so I quickly realized like the type of things I want to build are complex. And a lot of that complexity is in the back end and the server. And that stuff I just don't understand at all. And if like I'm going to have my whole career in building software, I have to understand that. So I went deep into this kind of back end programming rabbit hole. And as I was graduating college, I asked myself, like, where can I go to learn the most about this side of building product, the more back end server side infrastructure? Because that is where I had the biggest gap. And that led me to finding Braintree. Like I definitely was not like personally interested in payments at that point. And I actually remember when I was interviewing at Braintree, I asked them like, okay, so what are you guys going to build? Because you have a payments API now that's working. What's left? Which is really funny thinking back that was even a question I had. But really what drove me to Braintree wasn't payments. It was the team and their just focus on high quality software engineering, which turned out to be a great decision and something I just frankly probably got lucky on because I learned just an immense amount there. That's where I met my co-founder, Ali. Him and I were part of I think there was 7 or 8 of us on the engineering team when I joined. So we were both part of that early engineering team. And I just learned so much through there. But through it, like I got to spend a lot of time with Braintree customers, other developers building on the Braintree APIs. And it really made me fall in love with both kind of developer platforms and developer tooling and payments. Because I think payments was so interesting because it's one of those things that if it goes wrong, it's very bad. But when it goes right, it needs to be like fully in the background. And there's just something about that I really liked. And I just also liked that we were really enabling these new type of businesses. Like we were enabling kind of new attempts at what we now call things like software as a service or gig economy. But like all those explorations wouldn't have been possible if there wasn't a very easy to use, flexible payment system supporting it.
Yeah. And is that what you're getting at is about, I can pay you through a dongle on my cell phone, right? With a card, that kind of thing? Is it?
Yeah, we didn't work as much in the card present, to use like a fintech term, which is what like Square really innovated in. But a lot of the design choices we made at Braintree in the early days clearly went on to inspire other companies like Stripe. And between Stripe and Braintree, I think probably almost all the like innovative payments related services that we all now love, like Uber, Airbnb, Lyft, etc., all came out of Braintree and Stripe. Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. And then tell me about your transition from Braintree going to Venmo.
Yeah. So when I had been at Braintree for about 5 years, I spent the majority of my time working on our like API and external developer experience and like how merchants would integrate and add Braintree features and all that. And then as I wrapped that up, I wanted to get more involved in consumer. And so I led kind of a skunkworks team that was exploring kind of new frontiers in payments. And the things that we were looking at was social payments. So we were getting a lot of actual inbound from most of the major social networks and similar apps about how they could start facilitating payments directly in their news feed or in their messaging apps. And that led me to start to think bigger than just payments, but about what we at the time called commerce, where if you think about a payment, like a payment is usually the last step of a very long funnel from the full checkout process to the product discovery process, et cetera. And I thought what I got really excited about was like, hey, can we broaden our aperture at Braintree? Can we start to support helping businesses not just with payments, but with customer acquisition, with discovery, all of that? A lot of those experiments didn't end up going anywhere. We did ship some pretty cool stuff with Facebook and Pinterest, but none of it got real volume. But that just made me interested in how can we do more with payments than just the pure moving of the money? And I was expecting actually to leave the organization altogether. But as I started to talk to folks, everyone was like, hey, you need to go talk to the team at Venmo, which one piece of history. So Braintree acquired Venmo in 2012. Then we collectively got acquired by PayPal in, I think, 2014. So Venmo and Braintree have been linked for a while, but we pretty much let the teams operate independently even before we got acquired by PayPal. And then post-acquisition of PayPal, we really got separated because PayPal was really divided between their more business-oriented services and offerings and their consumer-oriented services and offerings. So Braintree and Venmo fell on either side of that divide. And so I hadn't really spent a lot of time at Venmo. And as I looked at the business, looked at the usage, it just was really remarkable. I think Venmo was driving the vast majority of new user growth across PayPal globally, even though Venmo was only in the US. But even with all that going on, the actual internal team at Venmo was I would describe it as criminally underinvested in. They had, sadly, a fairly big exodus of their leadership team post-acquisition, and they really hadn't filled that in both strategically or from just a team leadership perspective. So I saw it as just a great opportunity, one, to build my leadership skills, and two, just a phenomenal product opportunity where we have this app that has incredibly loyal, rabid fans that is doing something really well today in P2P, but had a lot of opportunity to do more. And that gave me a great opportunity to push forward a lot of my thinking and thoughts on commerce and how we can do more than just payments. And that led to expanding into the real world with the Venmo debit card, and also starting to explore how can Venmo help users discover businesses through something that got released shortly after I left, which was called Business Profiles.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you that because if you're just facilitating payments between banks, as far as I'm aware, there are no fees that are added on. So how does Venmo make money through that?
Yeah, Venmo, for most of my time there and for most of its history, has lost an incredible amount of money. So you're right that the bank or ACH based payments, there is a very low fee. Once you hit scale, you're paying fractions of a penny. So it's effectively free. But the problem is about a third of payments on Venmo are actually funded with a debit card, which Venmo is then paying roughly 1%. And then you layer on fraud on top of all that. And the end result is you're losing hundreds of millions of dollars annually. So it was a big problem. Venmo, especially when I joined, was very unsustainable when it came to a business. And so generating revenue wasn't a nice to have. It was necessary for Venmo to continue to exist in its current form.
Did it start as a loss leader kind of idea? Or if it was never making money and then you're talking about costs on top of it, add to the fact, that it's losing more money, what was the original idea or what made it attractive if that was going to be the economic reality?
So when we were independent and it's just Braintree, the strategy was definitely a long-term strategy, but the vision was it having both sides of the network. If you have consumers and you have businesses, you have the ability to start to do things like closed loop payments where you can completely cut out all the processors and payment networks and increase your margins. And it goes back to this idea of commerce. You can start to do things like user acquisition and command a much higher margin with businesses. So that was the overarching vision, was payment processing on its own is a commoditized business. like we need to have like a defensible, differentiated set of features if we're going to really succeed long term. And we saw consumer as the obvious path to that. I think when we joined up with PayPal, I think that got a lot less clear. And I think especially the kind of gap in leadership at Venmo led them to kind of I think they weren't really sure what they wanted to do. I think when I joined, the primary focus was following in PayPal's footsteps, which is to do online payments. Think Venmo button at major websites to buy things with Venmo, which I think makes a ton of sense. And that product is doing great today. I think over the last year, I think it actually launched on Amazon, which was mind-blowing to see. But I think when I joined, Venmo was every single user saw Venmo as a P2P app. And when you really dig into user behavior and talk to users, what that actually means is it's like really more tied to real life. It's like most people are using Venmo when they're out for drinks, they're on a trip, things like that.
Yeah,
they're not
totally.
thinking about Venmo when they're online shopping.
Yeah. It also had the good fortune, or it became a verb, right? People would say, hey, Venmo me. That doesn't often happen. Google had the same thing happen to it. So that's pretty cool.
That was one of the most compelling aspects about Venmo was this Venmo users, like when you talk to them about what do you like about Venmo, a lot of the time they talk about how Venmo made money less awkward. And I almost think the reason Venmo became a verb, I think some of it had to do with how great Venmo was, but also it was because people really don't like to talk about money. It's awkward to say, hey, you owe me $20 for drinks. Can you pay me back? It's much less awkward to say, hey, can you Venmo me for last night? And I think that was a very insightful thing for me and something I still draw on a lot today, which is money, and especially TradFi and fintech, require a lot of trust and there's a lot of emotion, and it's not black and white. And you really need to be thinking about how you're helping the user through that experience, not just keeping them safe and doing the nuts and bolts of things.
Yeah, I know the social aspect there is really interesting. I hadn't thought of that, but it is. Things can become transactional, right? If I have to give my friend a $20 bill, that seems weird. Whereas if you can abstract it out to Venmo, or you just send a request to your friends for splitting the check at a restaurant, it's like there's a layer there that kind of takes away that transactional feel to it, I think.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, that's cool. I think I don't know this for sure, but I think you might be one of the only guests I've ever had on here who has a patent. And this one is called Systems and Methods for Authenticating a User Based on a Computing Device.
I think I might have a few patents, actually.
Oh, really?
But it's one thing I'll say just generally about patents, and then I'm happy to explain this one specifically. I had very mixed feelings about it. I think when you're at a publicly traded company like PayPal, you're forced to do things like this just to protect yourself. At least that was how we thought about it inside PayPal. Yeah, I have very mixed feelings about it in general, but it was for a legitimate reason. I think that patent you're talking about was a lot of what we were trying to do in the mid 2010s at Braintree was we were dealing with something we called internally the NASCAR problem, which we were seeing this huge proliferation of payment methods that businesses were putting in their checkout. This was Apple Pay, Google Pay. Visa has built a number of different alternative payment methods over the years.
So it's like a NASCAR car that's covered with advertisements from a million different places. Yeah,
exactly. And the thing, what's hard is there was pretty good data that adding payment methods does improve the conversion of the experience. But for an end user, if you have to look through a list of 10 different options of payment methods, that sucks. And it's especially bad because a lot of them you probably don't even have an account at. So it just doesn't even make sense to show you. And so what we were building at Braintree was a way to keep track of users' preferences and suggest payment methods that we thought were most applicable to this user, that never translated into that vision never quite translated into what we shipped, but it was definitely a fun exercise thinking through how we might do it.
You mentioned earlier that you didn't get into crypto until about 2021-ish, but obviously you're in the payment space for all of that decade prior to that, and Bitcoin reached some sort of cultural consciousness among folks probably 2013, 2014, and then Ethereum came around in 2015, 2016. What were your thoughts on crypto at that point as you're in the payment space and doing all this? I'm just curious, like, what was your first reaction to it?
So a lot of us at Braintree and myself were very aware of crypto from early on. I think even in 2011, I think a lot of us were, for fun, building our own implementations of Bitcoin miners, like talking through the Bitcoin white paper. So from a pure technology standpoint, and at that time, I think a lot of us at Braintree were very interested in distributed systems and the theory behind it. So I was very engaged more on the academic side of crypto, but it was, especially back then, it was so early, so unproven that I would describe it more as like a toy or something that we were just playing around with. Fast forward to 2015 and going back to this idea of that NASCAR problem. One of the things that we were thinking about then was like, okay, we have a framework to allow businesses to have their user pay them using a variety of different payment methods without having to deal with the complexity of each payment method. We had Apple Pay, we had Google Pay, we had PayPal, we had card-based payments. And we were asking ourselves, like, what else should be here? And we started talking to actually Coinbase back then. And we're like, hey, we had crypto as a form of payment. And so we actually worked with the early team at Coinbase. I think this was maybe late 2015, and launched a merchant payment option with Coinbase then. Definitely have experience from back then. But after that, I think, and especially during the 2017 period, I was not deeply involved in crypto. So I had more of that outsider point of view. And back then it looked fairly scammy. And I think especially a lot of the other Web2 or TradFi companies that are adding crypto were adding it in such a surface level way that it just felt very much like a cash grab or more of a stunt.
Yeah,
that there was a big debate inside PayPal about crypto that was going on then. And there was a lot of pressure for Venmo to support crypto. And I was very vocally against it because at the time I was like, okay, I don't see the fundamentals here. For the most part, this looks a little bit sketchy. And a lot of the examples of other peer services and apps that have done this have done it in a way that I find to be just not great for the end user. So I was very against it. I think since then, especially when my co-founder kind of kept bugging me to look closer at crypto, I got into Ethereum, understood smart contracts, really started to get this idea of this is not just about a new currency. This is about a new foundation and infrastructure for the internet. I got a lot more excited. And I think the other thing that definitely helped was what really pushed me to leave Venmo was a lot of what Venmo was trying to do as I was leaving, and a lot of this seems to have continued, is move more into financial services. Because I think one of the things you realize in P2P based businesses is I would probably grossly simplify the people who use P2P services into two big groups: young people and people who are poor and don't have money and need to split bills and need to coordinate with their friends and family to make purchases. And that second group, it highlights a much bigger problem, which is even in the US, one of the wealthiest countries on earth, there is a pretty big population of people that just do not have access to financial services. And a lot of people in fintech will describe this as banking the unbanked or increasing financial accessibility. And this is not unique to Venmo. This is something that I think the industry has been really working on for a long time. But the more I looked at how we would do it, what would we have to do to get there, it was depressing. Meaning there was just so much red tape to cut through. So much of the infrastructure really makes this problem worse, where a lot of the attempts to give financial services to people who need it ultimately result in taxing them. One of the features that I launched when I was at Venmo that was transformative from a business perspective was instant cash outs. So the ability to take money out of your Venmo account and move it into your bank account instantly. We, like most of the industry, charged a fee for that. And it was and probably is still one of the biggest revenue drivers for Venmo. But it just felt wrong to me because it was the people who actually need that feature are people who literally can't wait 3 days to get money into their bank account. And like those people where money matters, it's like we're basically taxing them. We're asking them to pay a 1.5% fee just to get their own money. And it's great that turned into a like $100+ million revenue business within the first 12 months. It just felt wrong from like my mission and goal as like helping people with software. And so like that's what caused me, when I left Venmo, I took a break from fintech and I actually went into education technology. But I think I still had a soft spot for solving this financial inclusion problem. And once I better understood smart contracts, blockchains, all that whole ecosystem, it was like oh wow, there's finally like light at the end of the tunnel. Like we have a lot of work to do as an industry to get to the place where we could start giving people banking services via crypto. But I think we can get there. And that's what I get excited about.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. It's also just a so much cleaner system, like you're saying, with like very few fees. I just wanted to say, you're mentioning Venmo and their crypto. Like, I'm not saying this is anything you did, but I do think the Venmo crypto product that they rolled out is not that great. You don't even really own your crypto there, and you can't sell it once you have it. And so I don't know who's making decisions over there, but as far as I know, what they've done is really clunky. But then getting back to Meso, you had mentioned your co-founder and looked around, and you were both deep in the payment space. And there were other folks who were trying to help with the onboarding, getting your fiat into crypto, but they didn't have the fintech experience that you guys did. So what were some of the lessons that you guys applied to that with Meso, and how are you hoping to make it a lot easier for folks to just turn their dollars into Bitcoin or Ether?
That's a great question. I think two big things come to mind. I think the first is like risk, which is preventing fraud, preventing crime, is one of, if not the number one problem to solve. I think if you can do risk management, everything else gets infinitely easier. And a lot of what I see across the kind of on-ramping and centralized exchange ecosystem today, I see as products making the decision to push the problem of risk management onto the user. Like making me wait 10 days to take my money off Coinbase is basically managing risk at my expense, at the expense of my experience. And that's just not okay. There's lots of ways to solve that, but it requires building and architecting the system and the data you capture and how you use that data, very well. So I think the one big part of it is we've invested very heavily into risk management so that we can try to be as flexible and non-intrusive as possible. I think there's a wealth of data that is available on chain. And I think a lot of what our focus is at Meso right now, especially considering just where we're at in the market, being in the depths of the bear market, we really want to focus on being the best way for crypto natives to move money on and off chain. Obviously, we are excited and we are building towards a future where we can onboard billions of new users to crypto, but that's not happening yet. And I think the products and platforms and services that I think will eventually onboard the next billion users are going to be the ones that are embraced and used today by the kind of passionate crypto native population we have today.
Yeah, no,
and so,
I get that. It sounds smart because you're trying to appeal to a group who's already had a bunch of issues getting money on and off, right? So they know
exactly
how hard it is and what a pain in the ass it is. But now you can be like, no, try Meso and see how much easier we've made it.
And I think the other advantage we have with that population is most of them have a rich history on chain, and like that data, like especially like wallet age, like which protocols they've interacted with, et cetera, we think is a great way to manage risk and hopefully minimize what other kind of off-chain data we need from the end user. The things like KYC, the actual regulation behind KYC is very open for interpretation. There are many ways you can know your customer. It is not prescribed outside of a few specific circumstances what you have to do that. And so my long-term vision is, can we get to a world where, especially when we're talking about lower dollar amounts, can we do that with like transparent KYC, where if you connect your wallet And we're able to, through maybe it's future decentralized identity protocols or just a diversity of on-chain activity, can we use that to feel comfortable that we know who you are, we know you're not a bad actor, and can do business with you? I think that is one thing that I would love to get to. But I think risk is the one part of it. I think the other big part of what we're trying to do is build for global usage. I think crypto is so fascinating coming from fintech because it's global by default. Like when I talk to teams building wallets or decentralized exchanges or just different crypto apps, and I ask what regions matter to you, where your users coming from, most of the time I get an answer of everywhere. Like we might not even know. It's just like we just get users from everywhere. And that's very incompatible with the world of TradFi. There's a lot of on and off ramps that claim to be, hey, we can accept customers in 120 plus countries. But the reality is almost all on ramps who say that, what they really are saying is we can accept Visa and MasterCard based payments from across the world. Most of the world, or many regions of the world, don't use cards. So supporting Visa and MasterCard payments in some country is somewhat valuable, but if only 2% of the population use Visa and MasterCard there, what have you really solved for? So the real way to solve for international payments is local payment methods. And so every region is going to have a set of payment methods that the consumers there prefer. And so what we're building, and a lot of this is what we learned from building Braintree, is how to abstract that and how to set up our infrastructure and our platform such that adding hundreds of alternative payment methods over time isn't going to stress the system or make it more complicated for the end user or for the developer looking to integrate our services.
You reminded me of what you said about when you were at Venmo and you were talking to regulators a lot and they wanted you to KYC every customer, but you said, no, we're good enough in the background here where we have good fraud detection and we have suspicious activity detection to the point where we don't need to do that. And it sounds like you're taking that approach and bringing it to Meso where everything's going to be in the background so that the risks that you're talking about can be assessed a lot more quickly, and you don't have to wait that 3 to 10 days to get your coins off of Coinbase or whatever. Am I getting that correct?
Yep, that's exactly right. And I think the other big part of that, outside of waiting time, is fees. The actual, there's no question in my mind that we as an industry need to find a way to make on and off ramping free. That is going to be necessary for crypto to have the impact we think it should have. There are many ways in terms of just the raw processing of fiat payments that you can get close enough to free. But the problem to solve after that is risk. And so this is why it's like right now, your choices are between a rock and a hard place. It's like you can go to a centralized exchange and wait days to get your coins, or you can go to an on-ramp and pay an exorbitant fee. And so neither option makes sense to me. I see both as like Band-Aids and not really solving the root problem.
I find that really interesting that you guys are aiming at crypto natives, people who are already in the space. What do you think? A couple questions here. We're still in a pretty bad crypto winter. Do you see signs of that changing right now? And then do you have are you hoping to see something in the future where you would then know that, okay, this is becoming a lot more broadly accepted and there are a lot more people coming into the space?
Yeah, I think this is my first crypto winter, so it's like hard, or I don't really trust myself to know, are we seeing signs of life or not?
You're such a baby.
One of the things that worked out well is we raised for Meso right at the top of the last bull market. And I think we did that with kind of full knowledge that we're probably going to have another bear market. And we want to make sure that we have the funding to get through that. And that's the situation we're still in. So in many ways, we're ignoring it and we're just focused on building ourselves and working with other builders. And I don't even know when we want to consider the bear market started or not, but it is every day. I feel like I'm watching, talking to, interacting with new projects, exciting builders. So that's what gives me confidence that we're still on a good path. I think the things that I am especially paying attention to is, and this is almost like, I feel like cliche at this point, but like smart contract wallets and account abstraction. I'm in this to scale self-custody. Like I think one of the things that was interesting when we were fundraising is we definitely encountered a pretty big group of VCs that seemed to believe that there was pretty likely what was going to happen is you were going to have these big centralized players be custody providers and like users won't self-custody. And to me, like that, it just feels like we're throwing the baby out with the bathwater. Like the self-custodial encryption keys, like getting that to scale, I think is going to change the world almost as much as blockchains will change the world.
You can't be your own bank if you don't control your wallet. Yeah, that's totally antithetical to the whole movement here, I think.
Yeah, and so that is what we are building towards at Meso. It's like the customer in our mind is an external wallet. Like we don't have control over it and we don't want control over it. And so we're really excited about that. But at the same time, like if I had a friend, like especially a non-technical friend or family that was like, hey, I want to get involved in crypto, I would have a very hard time telling them to set up a self-custodial wallet because I know how unsafe it is and how much can go wrong. I think smart contract wallets in many ways feel like the path forward. And I think we've seen huge breakthroughs of the last 12 months.
The difference. Like, what is the difference with a smart contract wallet versus a custodial wallet?
So in most blockchains, and I'll just talk from the perspective of Ethereum to make this easy, but you have two types of accounts on a blockchain. There are externally owned accounts, or often referred to as EOAs. These are like self-custodial keys. This is like the encryption. There's a public and private key pair that is external to the blockchain.
Yeah, so and then there's my MetaMask wallet.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. A MetaMask would be an EOA. And then there are like smart contracts, which don't have a key pair because they're only on the blockchain. Externally owned accounts, there are very kind of rigid authentication and authorization requirements that are encoded into the blockchain itself. So like how a signature is verified, how a signature is generated are all set in stone. We can think of it that way in the blockchain. A smart contract is code. So you can do anything with a smart contract. So the concept of a smart contract wallet is saying, what if instead of holding your actual tokens and value in an externally owned account, we instead move that into a smart contract and let the smart contract implement whatever logic the user wants to handle authentication and authorization of how to move those assets. And so like the early example of a smart contract wallet would be a multi-signature wallet like Gnosis Safe, where you can say this wallet, to move any money in this wallet, we need 2 of 3 keys to sign, which significantly increases security. Right. So that like smart contract wallets, especially over the last 12 months, I think the big focus is, all right, how do we take this from a very specific thing like a multi-sig wallet and expand it to be like an infrastructure that can be used for kind of any kind of wallet, whether that's for a business or a consumer. And we're seeing teams explore things like giving users the ability to authorize or interact with their wallet using an off-chain authentication method, like social login from like a TradFi provider like Google or Apple, or just other means of authentication. Okay. And then the big advantage I see there is now you have a path to do things like recover accounts, rotate keys, introduce security policies where maybe you can very easily and seamlessly move money as long as it's under $1,000. And if it's over $1,000, then you need elevated security practices.
Yeah, that's cool. So it's really a question of flexibility and like customization. Okay, Ben, so tell people, Meso are you still in a wait list period, or what's the latest on getting people onboarded?
So we are going to be launching for end users later this month. You can follow us on Twitter at Meso_network, or I guess I should say X now, which feels very weird.
I'm not going to do that.
I'm not going to do that. But so you can follow us there. We'll be posting updates hopefully the next week or two on more details of how to get access to our initial user launch. But the real game for us is our SDK and our platform. And so we're in conversations with a number of crypto teams right now about integrating our SDK and expect to start to roll that out this fall.
Okay. That's excellent. Ben, thank you so much for the deep dive in payments and just sharing your story with me. And good luck with everything with Meso. And as I said at the top, I think this is definitely one of the more important areas to get right for folks because it is a pain in the ass to try to move money in and out of crypto systems. Godspeed to you, and thanks a lot for being here.
Thanks, Matt. It was great to talk.
That's it for this episode. Thanks for joining us, and don't forget to rate and follow this show on Apple, Spotify, and Amazon Music. Decent People is a production of Decential Media. It is produced by Matt Bogart with music by Brian Duncan and Kareem Imes.